The Bengals and the Chargers are the most disappointing teams by far out of all those 0-2 teams. So the debate and question that we have right here is, should we be more concerned about the Chargers or Bengals 0-2 start? And once again, Zach, the mic is yours to kick us off.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because there are just so many similarities with these two teams, right? Not only are both of them 0-2, but both of them have young franchise quarterbacks that each paid a whole lot of money to this offseason. And I think it's interesting, right? Because with the Bengals, they have a little bit of a track record, right? Really, both these teams do. But the Bengals did start 0-2 last year, and they found a way to get all the way back to the AFC Championship game for the second year in a row. They almost won that game. And a lot of people around Cincinnati are like, yeah, we'll just do it again. We started off 0-2 last year. We're going to do the same thing this year. And for me, I don't feel that way at all. When you look at this Bengals team, I thought, especially going into week one, given Joe Burrow and his struggles historically against the Cleveland Browns, you also remember they announced the Burrow contract literally right as that opening night Chief-Lion game was kicking off. I think that was a shot at the Chiefs to say, you know what? We don't care that you're on prime time to start the season. We're going to take all that spotlight away by paying Joe Burrow the big bucks. Just the fact that he always plays with such a chip on his shoulder, I was expecting Cincinnati to at least get off to a solid start, better than last year, but it's the opposite. They're now sitting at 0-2 with both losses coming in the division. And what I saw in week 2 on Sunday against the Ravens, like the Ravens were another team. You alluded to it. Like we had a ton of questions going into the season with the Ravens and their new offense. And I know they beat the Texans week 1, but it was the Texans. And we still came out of that game with a ton of questions. And Lamar Jackson shredded this Bengals defense. Like I thought I could count on Lou Anarumo and this Bengals defense to be one of the better units in the league, but they got shredded by Lamar Jackson and company on Sunday, which I think is a major concern. And I do think that when you look at some of the other teams in the North, the Ravens are 2-0. They've gotten off to a really good start. I still believe in the Steelers, despite how ugly their offenses looked in the first 2 games. I think it was very important. They found a way to win yesterday, and Joe Burrow has just not looked like himself. I think that's really the number one concern here is I don't know if Joe Burrow is healthy. And I don't know if Joe Burrow is going to be healthy at any point this season because it's not like he could just get surgery. It's a calf strain. Like that's not something you could just repair. I guess the only way would be if he sits out for an extended period of time, but you're already 0-2 and if you don't have Burrow, you're screwed. Like if you have to start Jake Browning, that's a major, major problem. And I just don't know if this guy's going to be able to get better this season, which is a huge deal. So I lean the Bengals. I have some thoughts on the Chargers as well, but I'll pass the mic over to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm 60-40 here. And that basically tells a story that I am generally concerned with both teams, almost equal. But the 60-40 is just me trying to pick a side here. I could really go 50-50 here. But the team I'm going to go with is the Chargers. I am definitely more concerned with them right now. Now, with the Bengals, listen, Joe Burrow Joe Burrow is basically the biggest thing here for me of concern, not necessarily how out of sync they look on offense, because truth be told, Joe Burrow is 1-7 in opening games, week 1 and 2, 1-7 throughout his career. So he has never really been a good starter to a season. And generally, I trust him more in December, in January. Last year, we was in this very situation. And I understand this year is different when you consider the health of Joe Burrow in the calf. Now, I thought when you think about it, right, because obviously it's one thing to think in the present day, and there's another thing to think in hindsight. In hindsight, now that they are 0-2 with Joe Burrow playing, maybe it was better to start the season with him on IR because they're 0-2 anyway. So maybe they should have started off with him on IR and got him for Monday night being the first game that he plays this year. But, Joe Burrow is a superstar. They can pretty much dictate what they want to do, and he wanted to play, and they're 0-2. Now, I do think this offense, as long as Joe Burrow is on the field, can sustain offense. So if there's any concern, really, for me, it's more so about Joe Burrow's health and the reactivation of that calf, which it seemed like he did on Sunday. But as long as he is there, let's say he doesn't play on Monday and they are 0-3, believe it or not, I'm still not writing this team's obituary despite being 0-3. If push comes to shove, because I do believe that Joe Burrow is an elite quarterback where if he finds his footing, they could generate wins to barely get in. And if the Browns or who you think they are, Zach, if the Steelers is who I think they are, and the Ravens who I think they are, then the Bengals should still be in position. And it doesn't help that they dropped the 2 division games as well. And I'll get to that. But it'll make the next 2 rematches more important when you talk about tiebreakers. Now, the reason why I am slightly more concerned with the Chargers is because, unlike the Bengals, they weren't in an offensive funk. They put up 58 points through the first 2 weeks, but yet they are still 0-2. What else could you do? You putting up points. Justin Herbert looked good. The offense looked good, but they're still 0-2. And this is why I'm more concerned with them, is because it's evident to me that Brandon Staley is a problem here. And I think they're too cheap to fire him and hire somebody else. And that's the problem, because what I was going to talk about with my take for 99 is that I do believe that Sean Payton and the Chargers could have benefited, and they're going to regret not benefiting from this partnership that they should have, got in and locked in together. They're 0-2, Sean Payton and the Broncos. The Chargers are 0-2. They was on a collision course for Sean Payton to be the head coach of this team, right? Everything opened up. Blowing that 27-0 lead against the Jaguars gave the Chargers probable cause to fire Brandon Staley. Having a quarterback potentially on the market, not on the market, but available to coach, was probable cause for Sean Payton to come out of retirement. They was on a collision course, but yet the Chargers was too cheap, and cheap don't get you nowhere. And now, no matter how good their offense is, they can't recover from it right now until they fire Brandon Staley. And who knows when they're going to, face the music with that. So, it has to be them. They lost to the Titans. Come on, bro. Respectfully, I understand the Titans, the last couple of years has been a good team, but you shouldn't lose that game on top of that. And the Chiefs are still here in this division. At least with the Bengals, I think things are more wide open, but the way how the stars are aligning, the Chiefs may win this division again. And if you had a guy like Sean Payton paired alongside Justin Herbert, maybe that was enough to take over this division. But yet Brandon Staley, once again, is messing things up. And my last point here is, how many excuses we going to give, right? A couple years ago, it was Brandon Staley didn't have his guys on defense. Okay, 2 years ago, it was, injuries, or, they couldn't run the rock. They needed a new coordinator. All right, they got the coordinator. They got the defensive guys. What's the excuse now? Why are you 0-2? So because with the Bengals, I can give you a reason, kind of why they are 0-2. Generally, that's how they start. Generally, Joe Burrow's out of sync. So I know the reasons why, and those things could be fixed when you understand the reasoning. But with the Chargers being 0-2, I don't understand why they are 0-2 and why they keep making the same mistakes they do. And that's why they are more concerning to me.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page in the sense that we're both pretty concerned with both these teams. Obviously, both of them came into the season with very high expectations. With the Chargers, though, I can't say I'm surprised. This is their fault. You said it. They had every reason to fire Brandon Staley after that Jaguar game. And even if they wanted to the year before, after he cost them that Raider game, I wouldn't have thought it was crazy. But we know Dean Spanos would never fire a coach after just one season. And when you look historically at the coaches the Chargers have had over the course of the last decade and a half, they interviewed Andy Reid before the Chiefs hired him in 2013, but they hired Mike McCoy instead because it would cost them less money. Just 2 years ago, they had Brian Daboll in the building, and he was considered to be the favorite to get that job, but they decided to hire the cheaper option in Brandon Staley. And if you look at Brandon Staley's resume, there's really nothing on it that would have suggested that he deserved to be one of the 32 NFL head coaches to begin with. He had one decent year with Sean McVay as the Rams defensive coordinator, and Aaron Rodgers picked apart his defense in that playoff game. So the Brandon Staley hire, it hasn't aged well, and the sooner the Chargers realize it, the better. I don't know how they haven't realized it by now. And you're right. There's literally no excuse for them to lose that game to the Titans. I understand that Mike Vrabel, as an underdog, is a very, very dangerous coach to be facing, but the offense for the Chargers really outplayed the Titans. It wasn't really that close. Tennessee made a couple big plays. Herbert even had the ball late, and he had the ball to start overtime. I know he was able to tie the game for them, but he could have won the game for them either instance. So if you're the Chargers, I've said it many times, like they are just not winning anything with Brandon Staley as their head coach. And the question is, like, they face another 0-2 team this week in the Vikings. I'm pretty nervous about what Justin Jefferson could possibly do to that secondary. Like, if they lose that game, could he even coach week 4? Like, I don't even know if he can, because this is one thing we could agree on is this team has a lot of talent, and there's no excuses for them to be this bad. If they lose that game and start 0-3, I don't know how this guy is coaching in week 4. But again, I don't know how he's coaching after they blew that playoff game. And I guess why we're on the same page in terms of who's more concerning is because I expected this. Like, if the Chargers fire Brandon Staley, could that be something that maybe wakes this team up and turn things around in the middle of the season? I don't know, but it is like, I don't know how the players feel about him. Like, I'm sure like there is a little bit of tension considering how quickly he snapped on the media after they brought up that Jaguar game. And I just don't know how many times, like, if you're in that locker room, you could just go through the same thing over and over and over again. I feel like when I watch the Chargers in a close game, it's the same simulation every time. Like, it's a game they should win, but they never do. And it's definitely frustrating.
Yeah, and I think when you have Traylon Burks, who I like, but he's still unproven, and Chris Moore, able to catch big plays against y'all defense, right? They had two.
Look like that dude, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Traylon Burks and Chris Moore had 2 explosive plays down the field of 70 yards and 40-something yards against y'all secondary. What the hell you think Justin Jefferson, who's averaging 100 yards per game, and freaking the rookie, what's the rookie name again?
Addison.
Jordan Addison, who has scored a touchdown in every game so far. What you think they're going to do to y'all defense? They're going to torch our defense as well. So I think next week, although you look at the Vikings 0-2 as well, you think the Chargers should win that game. It's not a given. Both of their defenses stink, so it may come down to who has the ball last. And that's still dangerous territory. So they could potentially be 0-3. Who knows, right? So at the end of the day, they're more concerning because I just don't think they could defeat those bad habits as long as Brandon Staley's still coaching the team. And when you talk about the golden opportunity to get a Hall of Fame coach in Sean Payton, yes, I understand people think he's overrated. I think we need to stop that. But he's not getting off to a good start with Denver. And that wasn't a situation I had felt confident in anyway. But, I mean, come on. They should have made this pairing happen. Not a lot of guys like that is going to be in the open market in the future. So when you do decide to pull the plug on Brandon Staley, now you got to exercise your options. Maybe Kellen Moore is a guy you promote to being a head coach, but yet he's still unproven. Some people think he's unproven as a coordinator because he has so much, that he brings to the table, not an identity, but more so, as you go type of play calling he does. We don't even know if he's a good coach or fit to be a coach. So where do they go? You don't have Hall of Fame coaches dangling on the market like that with a dried up market on top of that. Sean Payton's market was dried up. They could have stole that. They had the quarterback to steal that. So, yeah, I am definitely more concerned. I am concerned with the Bengals, too, because an injury could happen. We saw with Aaron Rodgers. He had a calf injury in the summertime, and that calf injury led to an Achilles injury. And I understand we think it's just a freak accident. I don't think there's nothing accidental about that. He had a calf injury. That line stink. So, that could happen to Joe Burrow. Knock on wood. I'm knocking like crazy, right? Open the door. No, close the door. I'm knocking, but we saw it with Kevin Durant in the finals. He had a calf injury, and they let him play in the finals trying to win a game, and it turned into an Achilles injury. So clearly there's a correlation here. Now, the one good thing that I would say about the Bengals and why I am not as concerned as I am with the Chargers is because they are actually not letting Joe Burrow get hit like they used to. And they invested so much money on that offensive line. It's about damn time. Through 2 games last year, I believe Joe Burrow was sacked. I have it here. He was sacked about 8 times, 13 times last year. 13 times through the first 2 games. This year, he's only been sacked 3 times. So that's very positive when you consider the investments they made the last 2 years with that offensive line. And when you consider the situation of the calf, you don't want him getting hit like that. So I think there's some positives with the Bengals. and they look all right in the second half against the Ravens on top of that. So as long as Joe Burrow can be healthy, the main concern is with his health. I think they should be fine as long as he's healthy. So yeah, the Chargers got the number one answer for me.
One last point I want to make on the Bengals before we move on, and I think this is super interesting. Like, I just think these two franchises, the Chargers and the Bengals, they're so similar in a lot of different ways. And that number one way is, like, people don't realize the Bengals historically have been a very cheap franchise as well. But I think their ability to draft very well since really they got Burrow has kind of shielded that. You know, like they drafted Burrow, they drafted Chase, they drafted T. Higgins, they drafted Jesse Bates on defense. They brought in Henderson from the Saints, which has been a great addition. But my worry with the Bengals and Joe Burrow long term, you know his famous quote, like, the window is my career. As long as I'm here, we're going to have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Is I still put Mike Brown, the Bengals owner, in that same category as I do a Dean Spanos with the Chargers, or as I do with Dan Snyder in Washington. Guys that are among the worst owners in all of sports, and it's just very difficult to trust them long term to do what's best and to spend the money to put this franchise over the top. And we said it on our AFC preview pod, is on paper, I thought this was the best roster Joe Burrow would ever have around him in Cincinnati, given T. Higgins and the questions about his future in Cincinnati, with the offensive line and the amount of money they spent on that unit, with both coordinators back from last year, with the defense. And I just hope that we don't look back on this season for Cincinnati as a missed opportunity in a few years, when we just look at the roster around Joe Burrow and realize it's not as good as it once was.
I mean, look, both of these quarterbacks just got paid massive contracts. So it's not off to a good start. Now, Justin Herbert's situation is a little bit different because he's not actively losing them these games. You can make the argument that Joe Burrow is actively losing the Bengals games right now, but it's still a massive investment. And you have to be concerned with both sides. I just lean more to the Chargers because if not when, like, Kansas City has been stealing this division for the last 7 years. And I think they can get got. I don't think they're unbeatable. I think they're missing Orlando Brown, who is now on the Bengals. I think they, fell off a little bit, but still falling off may not result in them not winning this division this year. So once again, the Chargers have a golden opportunity had. Keenan Allen is only getting older. He's not getting any younger, right? Mike Williams is getting older, not getting any younger, right? So just like the Bengals,
they both torched the Titans secondary and they still lost.
Yeah, and they're getting older. So at the end of the day, both teams are trying to win championships. They are all in, and right now it's not looking good for both parties.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.